Hello and welcome to this episode of Inclusive Urban Futures. Today I'm really excited to speak with Christel Adamou, the Director of the Office of Professional Conduct at the Asian Development Bank in the Philippines. We often might ask ourselves why speak with work experts as urbanists and town planners. And I think that question right now is really fundamental because the COVID-19 has changed the way we work. It changed the world of work. We all work digitally now. We all Zoom. We share our knowledge in conferences through digital means more and more. And the way we work will change the way we use our cities, the way we design our cities. The question of inclusion has always been closely linked with cities, but it has been always linked, an important link with the world of work as well. So I think that it's really important to engage with this conversation today with experts coming from the world of work and who are also leaders in this field and explore what the future of inclusion, employment, and cities can be together. Christel Adamou, thank you very much for accepting my invitation and for being here. It is an honor to have you. You are a Director of Office of Professional Conduct of Asian Development Bank and advise the United Nations on the matters of human resources. So I just wanted to give you, ask you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us, how did you get into this line of work? What inspired you to take on this line of work?
Okay, thanks for having me on. I'm really honored to be here today and join this conversation. I hope it will be helpful for anyone, and just I'm happy to share my story and also learn about urban development, because it's as a citizen, as a person who lives in a city and also traveled around the world, it is a primary concern. So I'm happy to be here today and be part of this conversation. So just to give you a little bit more about my background, I would love to just share that I'm a mixed person. I was born in France to a Cameroonian father who came to France to do his postgraduate studies, and my mom is French Vietnamese. And she came when the Vietnamese took over Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City to these days. So at the end of the war, she migrated to France. And so both of them met, they were neighbors, and fell in love and had 2 children. So I grew up in that context of very multicultural, also multi-religious, and, but with a lot of freedom and independence in how we do things and think about the world that surrounds us. I think what really brought this family together was the values. Shared values. We were not talking about religion, we're not talking about culture, but really what brings us together was the values. So it really touched me from an early age, especially I was born in the 70s and there's not a lot of mixed couples in France. And I would see certain things. I also traveled abroad, went to Cameroon for a year as a child, went to the US a lot because we had relatives there. So I sort of had different perspective on culture and issues, but still from a young perspective. At the age of 15, I wanted to become a lawyer. I was just really sort of thinking, I need to be able to first understand the law, to defend myself, to fight against so many sometimes discrimination or issues that can happening, but also how to help others to do that and fight for their rights. So at the age of 15, I made that decision. I'm going to become a lawyer. And by grace of God, I went to law school, among other things, graduated. And funnily enough, I did not start my career as a lawyer, but as a teacher and as a lecturer. I was teaching French and English because I also had a master's degree in English as a foreign language. And so I was doing that while finishing my legal studies. But eventually I did some internships. And the internship, one of my major internships was the European Commission delegation to the UN in New York. And I got to sit at the Security Council. I got to sit at the General Assembly. I got to meet a lot of diplomats and other UN staff. And I just fell in love with it. I just felt like this is the right place for me. And not just the EU, but the UN, being with so many different nationalities from different continents. So that's how I felt for the UN or the international development world. I wanted to work for the greater good. I wanted to work for peace and justice. And one thing after the other, I started with the UN on the justice system, the internal justice system, and then grew into more responsible positions into HR management. And why HR? It's really because I wanted to move from an employment legal position dealing with disputes to where I could influence and make a difference on, before things really gets really wrong. Where can we make a difference? And HR management seemed to me the most appropriate place where you can work on policies, you can talk to people, you can train managers, you can develop talents. And I grew into the HR management after an MBA, and I never looked back. But I do have this feel for the international development world. It's my thing. I just love it. And you grow and learn so much when you work with others from different cultures.
And I saw some of your work and that some work that came to my attention, and I appreciated a lot, was your dedication to diversity in the workplace, and how to achieve that. Could you tell us a little bit about what is going on right now? I mean, we had a very, very odd year, 2020, 2021. It seems that the world of work is changing beyond comprehension. So what is the state of art of diversity in HR now? What are some positive changes that you see and some negative maybe?
I think even, Orna, it may have started even beyond when the Me Too movement sort of exploded. The Me Too movement was somehow the understanding that the gender is one aspect, but we have to look at the whole scope of how people work together, and that maybe some groups were not in the right place or didn't have an opportunity to speak up and really being to flourish in the workplace. So the Me Too movement for me, I think, has been this major turning point where leaders like, oh God, I mean, there may be something happening in my organization. There may be some stuff happening in my company. I need to look into that, or it might just blow up. And then the conversation around diversity, I think, really kicked off around that, the Me Too movement, about gender, how we treat women in the workplace, the relationship amongst each other. And then after that, I think I saw a bigger movement on diversity, inclusion, and even belonging over the last 2-3 years. I don't think we are that far ahead yet, but there is a starting point with gender being first. And gender is just one aspect. It's not diversity. Having men and women in the workplace is not diversity. Sorry. It's normal. But
that's absolutely correct. Yes. I mean, and Me Too movement, what was it, 2019? 18?
No, I think it was 18, if I'm not mistaken. We'll have to double check, but it was 18. It was 18 because we actually had a big moment. We, suddenly all the governments, stakeholders of the organization send us some letters like, what are you doing to prevent maybe possible issues in the workplace around the Me Too movement? Are you compliant? Are you trying to take proactive measures? So I remember we actually even had a case reported at that time, and we had to quickly pull up some policy and investigate. And it's really been a starting point, I think, for many organizations and companies. Like, where do we stand? What are we really doing about gender? And then I think the conversation started to grow. Diversity is not about having just women and men. It's about LGBTQ. It's about geographic representation. It's about languages. It's about maybe stuff on special needs.
Age. Age as well.
Age, or even women returning to work after maternity or after taking a few years to raise their children. So that is all diversity. But my understanding of that is there's still not a clear understanding, a common understanding of what diversity means in many organizations. From one organization to another, that means something completely different. And also for those who are more regionally based, what does it mean, to be diverse in Asia and the Pacific? Whereas if you're in North America, what does it mean to be at the World Bank or ADB to be diverse? So there's still not a proper understanding, a common definition of what diversity means. And it is worth looking into that. It's really worth looking into that.
Right. I think that I wanted to kind of ask you from this point, actually, for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, for me, diversity at workplace is actually a prerequisite for inclusion, especially if we're thinking about populations like migrants and immigrants, where basically not being included in the workplace, so because they're not so much diversity, means basically not being able to contribute to the society, contribute to one's family, and not being really be able to kind of be included as an active citizen. What would be your thoughts on that?
I think diversity and inclusion actually are not necessarily coming together. Right. I think someone famous said, diversity is like having different people on the dance floor, but inclusion is when they dance with each other, something like that.
Right.
The workplace is the same. You may have some diversity, but if you are not really taking any proactive measure for inclusion, different groups will get together. It may be nationality, it may be power-based, it may be gender-based, it may be other type of groups, and they will not communicate with each other. So diversity is not just a number. It's about really how people interact with each other, and you have to be extremely proactive into that. Right. If there's not an effort at the leadership level, at the organizational level, at the policy, then you'll have a diverse group, but they're not going to be inclusive.
Right. And what are some of the best practices that you can see from this? Some places where you thought, oh my goodness, well, they're really 3 steps ahead of everybody else.
I think there's 3 areas, very, very simple ones, but each organization should think through very carefully about how they hire their talents. The methodology from outreaching the talent, recruiting, the recruitment process, the type of questions, even how they actually process that sort of recruitment, and how they onboard those talents is extremely important. And it's not just about, as you hear sometimes, where people are not assets, people are people. And the way you actually frame your job description sometimes limits so much the talent pool, because there's just a number of years of experience that some people don't. If you want to have diverse group, they may never been exposed to certain jobs or experience. And so how do you hire people? This is extremely key, but it very often puts organizations or companies in a very uncomfortable zone because they're so used to do things in a certain way, right? So looking at the job description, the process, and the outreach is key. The second is to have really, how can I say, forward-thinking policies for developing talents in the organization, and not just looking at the best performers, but those growing a diverse group of people. And that means being proactive of looking at maybe geographically or backgrounds or skills, so that you don't just grow the top performers who are maybe already good performance because they started in good conditions, but have everyone brought together and create that cohort of talents, but that must be very, very diverse. And it's not just on us. And then the last one is to make sure that you have, in my view, I think it's necessary some targets, but not necessarily to say we're meeting numbers. So targets in terms of having enough opportunity for women to move around, not even necessarily get promoted, because it's an assumption that all employees want to reach the top. Some of them still just want to have opportunities to do other type of jobs in a career, but have this kind of glass labyrinth and glass ceiling open to everyone, and not just women at this stage, but for also other type of people. So being proactive in your policies, but also while respecting the merits of everyone, so that they're not seen as, they've come to this position because they're from a minority group or they're women, but just making sure you encourage. So that can be done through sponsorship, to mentoring. I know that a lot of women say we don't want coaching or mentoring. It's like we don't need to be fixed. You are right. But there are also certain situations where you need to encourage confidence. You need to make sure people are sponsored or have some support groups in the organization. That's also the reality of the workplace. And so placing those groups into that realm of success is also important. You have to be proactive about it at the organization level. It just doesn't happen naturally. So I'm a pro believer of some form of what they called active discrimination. But it's just to find the right balance of, making sure it's not ill perceived, but also really enables people to grow throughout the ladder in the workplace.
I think that this is absolutely crucial, because if I'm translating this now to the urban environment and urban futures, right? Cities are in fact, hubs of employment opportunities. This is, if the migration comes to the cities, it comes particularly for work. So if the companies or organizations don't have tools or need to still learn, as you rightly said, that means that there's a lot of work to be done there for the city to be more inclusive, because people came there not because for tourism, of course, but people usually come to settle to cities just because they have more opportunity to be employed and re-employed if they lose their job. And so if there is no enough diversity, and then second step inclusion in the workplaces of that specific cities, then the city might actually be limited, as it were, as an employment center to actually actively promote diversity out of work, especially if we come to the city to succeed, right? And I think that inclusion, in fact, the first kind of ideas of inclusion, how it can look like, could actually happen in the workplace, because this is why people relocate in the first place. So I thought
it's a great parallel, and I think what you just said is so right, because and we see this also internally. It's not because people don't have jobs that they just turn away. What they do is they just start trying other stuff, and they have side gigs. They get into the informal economy. They try all kind of stuff, and it's also in the workplace. Like now, I'm heading the equivalent of an ethics office, and we often hear that some local staff maybe wanted to do some trading activities outside of work, maybe international staff as well, taking other jobs or in other employment or consulting or being board members. It's everywhere. So no one is really focusing anymore on just one job, because they want to create their own opportunities. And if you don't allow for that inclusion, they will do something. They will, and it's the same in the urban environment. Those young migrants who come to France, for instance, they're not just turning away and going home because they didn't find an employment opportunity. They would create their own jobs, sometimes legal, sometimes illegal, and most of the time it's illegal. But if we have a very proactive inclusion policy, then we can really help those people to join the society and contribute in a positive manner. And I think it's the same in the workplace. If you don't take care of people these days, they are much more empowered than we think.
That's a good point.
And they will do something. Yes.
Right. thought that you were speaking about values and values of your family that connects people, unites people from 3 continents successfully. Yes. So when we speak about inclusion, what does inclusion mean to you, that concept that is now so much in use across different sectors? What does that mean?
No, you're right. For me, the starting point is the value in the workplace as well, because we're so different. We have so many different understanding of even what a value mean, and our own understanding on culture and all that. The value is the starting point. Where do we stand? And being able to really define what behaviors are expected under those values is critical. And if you start with that, you have a better chance for inclusion, being people are part of the way we work together. It's that, and more than just say, oh, come over and that's it. It's about how do we align the way we behave as an individual, as an organization. And the more those behaviors are defined, what inclusion means in that particular company or that particular setting, the more people have guidance to follow that and even go further in terms of going further. But you need to have that kind of really, really clear understanding on what inclusion means. Usually it's about behaviors more than anything like that. Yes.
And how about goals? Like if like having like a goal that is a common goal, would that suffice? I mean, of course, value can be also a goal. Like, let's create a very financially successful company, like or something to kind of what I feel at this moment when we're talking about inclusion in theoretical terms. What I miss is that glue that brings people together. So it could be a value. Could we also speak about like a carrot, something that kind of say, okay, well, for this, we're going to all go this way. Because what I feel is, yes.
No, I mean, in most cases, there's often an overlap between purpose, mission, goal, and where do you fit the values in that? The values, in my view, is more who we are every day.
Right.
The mission is what we aspire to. Our overall purpose is why we're here, goal or journey towards the mission and the overall purpose. And all of that, the value is everywhere. It's like how we do that every day. How do we carry ourselves in achieving those goals towards the mission, towards the overall purpose? So if you had like somehow of a, I don't know, a pie, the value will be all over. It's just really who we are every day. And sometimes you find values are not achievable because they're actually not values. They are maybe aspirations of something we want to achieve as a goal, or rather than being a value of who we are every day. It is also, like inclusion, a huge work to be done on how to think those issues properly. It's not just throwing them because it's flashy and it makes us really look good, but it's a real discussion, a real consultative process as well. You cannot just throw values to people and say, these are the values and here you go. This is how we want you to behave. Having those, your target audience, if I can call it this way, the people you are looking to take on your journey, be part of the conversation. And not just your leadership. Very often we talk about values and inclusion and all those very important issues. The leaders have to show the way, walk the talk. I totally agree. But today, with the way everybody has a say on everything, especially with the social media, everyone can comment, make something about it. You need to bring people also in the conversation, everyone. because it's not just the leadership these days. Everyone wants to be part of change. Everyone wants to make a contribution. So having this right balance between the leadership and the staff or the people who are concerned by your policies is extremely important, so that you really have a clear understanding and everyone is empowered in achieving the purpose, but also the way they carry themselves. That's the values.
It's exactly digitalization now. So some people think digitalization will make the job on diversity easier, and some people are frankly scared that this new way of digitalization, where this kind of human interaction is out of their hands, in fact, will make it worse. What is your position on that? I'm sure that on your end, in your profession, many discussions went on this matter.
There's certainly probably not a perfect answer at this point. I can tell you that I've also tried to explore some digital solutions for recruitment in the course of my career. And there are pros and cons with that because it does not necessarily serve the best interest of everyone, in terms of, depending on how you come across on the video, may not be the real you in an interview, right? So, but it's just
maybe we have a bad interior.
Exactly. That may also just bring some more bias into your judgment of that. But I think the more and more some companies are thinking about artificial intelligence, and somehow it looks more as a way to go faster in recruitment rather than looking for the best people. But recruitment is really time consuming. It's really, really difficult. And you may not even be selecting the right person. But it feels to me that these days, if we say we want to be a more human-centered organization and more diversity, you should have just more human practices in your recruitment. And AI, artificial intelligence, other digital solutions for recruiting could be tools, but definitely not the only one during the recruitment process, because otherwise you may just be biased on some and lose some really good candidates in the process. Actually, the more I think about it, the more I feel that the digitalization of recruitment or talent search serves the opposite purpose of looking for diversity. Because when organizations started to digitalize their recruitment process, you have to fill out certain boxes and they look for keywords, then you sort of attract the same people. And more and more what I see is a sort of willingness to sort of let go on the criteria a little bit more, at least the years of experience. Because for certain jobs, you couldn't apply if you had not a minimum of 10 years, 15 years, but you could have really brilliant people with lots of potential as well. So there's some organization that start letting it go. We personally started in my previous organization to stop putting years of experience, but looking at competencies and maybe sort of type of exposure to sort of open the pool of talents for those particular jobs. But it is an exercise. Recruitment is an exercise. And that's a reality. You have to find a way to provide feedback about your experience, be somehow likable, and that whole exercise, how can you loosen it up or making sure you attract the right talents for the position, but also a diverse group. And that's not easy. And it's not going to get any better unless there's really a willingness to just use it as a tool, but also supplement your recruitment with other tools through your outreach, through your recruitment methodology, through the questions you ask, through the way you search for candidates in the pipeline. So it takes a lot of efforts.
I just wondered, in last year, 2020, 21, a year like no other, how did this crisis impact your line of work, and what have been some of the challenges that you've seen in maybe positive terms?
There's been some positive and, let's say, challenges attached to it. If I can start with the challenges, is obviously when everyone's working from home and somehow detached from the physical workspace, there's more risk, ethical risk, than ever before, such as, people spending time on social media, maybe posting stuff that they shouldn't, maybe having issues with other colleagues or managers and not reporting them because they're at work. They're not at work, it's a little bit more isolated, or simply resolve issues and concern in a timely and effective manner. When you are in the office, you can just have a coffee or meet over lunch and sort of clarify maybe some misunderstanding or communicate in a better way. So that work from home, working remotely, sometimes over different time zones, has been challenging for many. And we don't know if the type of issues that are reported to us are reality, or if it's just the surface because people have not reported it, or they've not reported it to us, or they've not reported it to their managers. So we don't know. But what we know is that everyone is really drained by the situation, tired with a lot of Zoom meetings, and this usually family, children, maybe some family members who have lost their jobs due to COVID-19 pandemic. So it's really, we know there's a lot of concerns, but it's not necessarily easy to tackle them because we're not physically together in the office. And so that creates a lot of risk, potentially from an ethical point of view, from a compliance point of view. But I'm hoping that whatever we haven't seen is not a huge risk for the organization, and there's still room for resolving issues effectively internally, or as they come effectively. Yeah. On the positive side, we found that staff, employees were more comfortable talking to us via Zoom, because it's much more almost intimate to talk to each other with the computer, who's somehow in between. And they've been also able to reach us, to contact us outside of working hours in a much more comfortable setting. We also found that it was easier to reach out to people, because when you're in the office, you also have to make an appointment, and everybody sees who is coming to you. And so there's much more sort of a confidentiality around having those discussions over Zoom and Skype for the type of work we do, to advise them on ethical issues, than if we were in the office. So I think it's really pros and cons in terms of the work we do. We might just think about some hybrid way of continuing doing the business this way, so that everyone feels comfortable reaching out to us. But it's been quite pros and cons in the process.
Interesting, quite interesting. But that you mean that you're more easily reachable through the internal network, then that basically they can ping you and say, I'm here, could you talk to me? Right. Yes. Your agenda is open, right?
My agenda is open. And for instance, if you're in the office, you will make an appointment. Everybody sees you when you come to the office. They may be asking, what kind of issues do you have? And so it is much more intimacy into getting this advice via Zoom or MS Team. Nobody sees you. You can do it after working hours, or you can take some time off, even on the break. No one's going to check on you, that who you're talking to. So it's been a lot more, giving a lot more room for people to actually communicate in a way with us than if we were in a physical office space.
And how about the organizations reach out? Considering that perhaps your internal communication online has increased, But how does that then, like organization like yours, for instance, speak with, like the outside stakeholders? Do they have less time then? Or they make a requirement, then you go like, okay, well, this is out. So we are full.
No, for as far as our work is concerned, we are more focused on the internal matters.
Right.
But
yours.
Yeah, so we're in an ethics office. But we've been trying to put enough information out there as well on our public website, so that if there's an external stakeholders or someone who's not internal to ADB, we're here to help if they have a concern around the workplace matters with another staff member, for instance. But as an organization, ADB, like any other organization, we had to adapt to this new reality, adapt our communication tools, adapt on webinars, work with stakeholders to make sure that everyone's sort of continue the work, but with those virtual tools. So there's been a time for adaptation for everyone. And it's not just for ADB, it's for absolutely everyone. And but I think we're there. So actually, it's really amazing the level of outputs that has been delivered during the work from home period, and considering the conditions and the lack of experience in a way we all had with this pandemic, was extraordinary results for the bank. And that's only a thank you to all the staff who's work hard and try to still meet targets in the midst of the pandemic.
I think I just wanted to bring up something that is going, that is kind of going and being, defined as a trend in a way in my sector, which is the city development and urbanism, housing. Here, on our side, we have a story or hope that many commentators basically are saying that the world of work will change. We will work from home more, and therefore we will all be free now to migrate to other parts of our respective countries that are more green, that are less inhabited, and that the business centers, the central business districts, will basically die. There is an expression now that is going around, says the death of the central business district, because everybody will, kind of be able to work from home, and that's going to be a new reality, or at least hybridly. What is your professional perspective on this, and our assumptions that are going on our side of the field? Is this really a reality? Are we going to really be seeing trends of people kind of leaving the cities and leaving the central districts? Or there is some sort of nuance here that, you would want to share from your perspective with us?
I will say this way: we're never going to be the same people and the same companies like before. I think for those companies who had a hard time to actually start working on work from home policy, remote work, because that kind of policy has been around for some time, but it was just a mindset that the trust of managers that their staff were doing the job when they were not physically in the office. Those who liked a bit of micromanagement and all that, I think it's just blown away. And it's true now. There's evidence that it works. There's still performance. There's still all those things. It works, and it makes also people more have a better work-life balance. That's what a lot of people want these days. So I think we're never going to go back to the old-fashioned way where you only have one district and you have to go to the office every day. And also because it's going to be cheaper for many companies to do that. But we still need to be somewhere connected to each other, sometimes physically. And what's happening these days, I've seen that in a few American NGO, they actually have no headquarters anymore. And when they advertise for several locations. So you can be anywhere already, apply for the job, be recruited there, have local salary conditions, true, but you can work from your hometown. and they just pay you from time to time a travel to the main headquarters. There may be some retreats, there may be a week or two of where you connect and you work on special projects, but that money saved actually can afford that kind of connection and opportunity to also travel to other country offices or etc. So it's this, I think I've seen that trend. People might be recruited from different location and just come to the headquarters from time to time. And because there's going to be a lot of cost saving challenges in going forward, many companies have suffered from COVID-19. There may be some decentralization as well as to where you will be actually setting up a business center. Like Paris La Défense, it's a big one, and it will probably continue to be there, but with very, very small offices, whereas you may have a bigger office somewhere else in France or elsewhere to accommodate maybe the core functions that need to be there. But really these days, is there any jobs that really is essential to be in the physical space all the time? I doubt it. More and more we have a lot of intellectual services. The internet and all those tools are very efficient. Doesn't look like we're going to go back to a very traditional mindset, and I don't think people want it.
Right. I think that maybe I would go back if you have any, good practices to share that you heard over this time that are inspiring in terms of diversity and inclusion.
I actually love the idea of promoting belonging, even rather than diversity and inclusion, because belonging sounds much more embracing and opening and embracing at the same time. And if this concept is much more northern, western than anything else. I think it was born even in Canada, but the belonging is really making sure people are also brought together where we respect their differences. I think that's also very important, because we can only work together because we are different and we complement each other in how we're different. So I'd love to hear more of that concept, belonging, going forward when we talk about how people work together, rather than just focus on diversity and inclusion. I think naturally some things will change, will move, as also it's geographic and the way the population change over the years, but belonging is extremely important. We can be very diverse, but how we feel that we belong and contribute is for me extremely key in a multifaceted society or workplace.
And is this something that you think that is missing from the current discourse on inclusion that is so much propagated by businesses, international organizations? And if there is more, some other issues that you think that should be underlined as missing?
I think the whole narrative about how we talk about diversity and inclusion should be really thought through very well. I think it's acceptable to think that there may be a different concept for every country or every company, but making sure that we have a sound narrative around those issues, that is not just about integrating, is not about just targets or numbers, but it's about how it really contributes to innovation, to being, better businesses, being more in touch with the reality of the world. That is important. And it's not just because we're meeting some targets or we want to be seen as a good company, but it's because it matters in the way we do business. And this is how we get the best out of our people, because of that diversity. It brings more innovation. It brings more, sometimes even conflict. Conflict helps to grow. We grow better. Yes,
that's true. And conflict sometimes can be only a misunderstanding.
Yes, that's okay. So that is important. I don't see it enough how people belong in companies, and with the focus now to just say we have targets, we need to promote more women, we need to have more diverse groups. It's about more how do we make sure that happens, but not just that. It's about making sure people feel they belong to the success of the company, and they belong to the teams, they have friends at the office, they belong, they're respected, and they're heard, and they're listened to.
And they can contribute. I think that
Yes,
sometimes when a person is excluded, I think that the pain is not being able to contribute.
Yeah.
That is the most painful thing. The fact that you're excluded, fine, you know, I mean, and not everybody wants to be included everywhere, right? But where you want to contribute and then you cannot because of different reasons, I think that that's the pain. And I'm thinking, listening to what you're saying, I'm just coming to kind of thinking through the concepts. It seems to me as if diversity is just step number one. Just like bring different people together. Which is quite simplistic in a way. Inclusion is step two, try to make them work together in a way, but belonging, in fact, is the end. That's the goal in a way.
that's the goal.
Belong.
To belong, because you belong to a purpose, you belong to a mission, you work towards goals, common goals, and you adhere to values. It's really being part of it. It's like in a family. I mean, it's exactly that. There's a diverse group in the family members. Are you inclusive as a family? Do you feel like you belong? This is the same. Yes.
And actually not belonging is one of the greatest pains if you don't belong. Anyway,
it's the greatest pain. But for the challenge for companies or for any workplace is to make sure that people who don't feel they don't belong are not causing risk, are not leaving the company, and because in a family you stay, you're still bound by maybe some blood link. There's still something in the family that doesn't necessarily make you leave the family. You're still part of the family. But in a company, you're not talking about children, you're talking about adults who have maybe other options, or maybe also doing other things. So you have to be very careful about making sure they belong, so that they keep contributing in a very positive manner to the organization or the company.
It's quite interesting. And I was also thinking that you speak about family belonging and company belonging, and what came to my mind when I was questioning myself about these concepts was actual national belonging.
Yes.
And urban belonging to a city. So this was in my mind. So that means that we discovered that there are actually many layers of inclusion and belonging. So from the family unit through a company that works on a mini scale, to a neighborhood, to a city, to a nation.
That's right.
Lots of layers of belonging. I think that many questions, as you rightly said as well, are not answered, or maybe not even explored in some cases, because there is no framework, I would think, or the frameworks we have maybe are not as evolved as they should be. I would think there is quite a lot of work to be done there.
Yes.
Understanding what this is, and kind of like going really to a social science examination and of serious nature, to actually try to understand and properly code.
Yes, and this framework is critical. You need a framework to go somewhere to be able to put definition and some action plan. But it's also important to know to see who's doing that.
Exactly.
It's extremely important, because if you still have the same elites and the same people who have not experienced that at all, and they're doing those frameworks, it will be very difficult to implement. And that's why it's also very important to bring the voices of the people who are really concerned about that into the framework. It's extremely important, so to have something sustainable. and that is fit to the purpose. But very often those policies are done by people who have not experienced that and may not really understand and the reality of what's going on, and so that creates a disconnect.
That's correct, because a person who basically never had to make an effort to, was never excluded in a way, or never painfully excluded, you cannot have the feeling, of what is there to work on, really. What is it? How to write a policy? When we were preparing for this interview, we were saying that basically it is, like somebody who looked at 7-8 people, climbing the Mount Everest and theorizing about it, but have never done it. You cannot write a policy effectively about something that you've never been through, especially if it is a challenging issue. There has to be some sort of personal experience in addition to professional expertise. I just wanted to go to the very, very last question, and that is, if you have a more important message to share with the audience of Inclusive Urban Futures, what would it be?
My message is to everyone who's working on urbanization and making it a better environment for a diverse group. I want to say you're doing an amazing job. It's extremely important. The world is going to become much more urbanized in the future. We all know that. The population are growing everywhere. There's so much to do in this area, not just in Europe, but in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. And it's a key social, economic, environmental. It can have such a social, economical, and environmental impact on the future that I'm just hoping that the inclusion is going to be something not left out, but really integrated into your thoughts and your reflections as groups working on those issues, so that we can really build a better environment for everyone.
Well, thank you very much, Christel. It was an absolute honor and an absolute pleasure having you. I've really enjoyed our conversation, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna, and I hope to see you soon. Take care of yourself. Yes, and it was my pleasure. The honor was mine.
You were listening to the podcast Inclusive Urban Futures with Anna Rosenfeld. Please stay tuned for the next episode.